We have stared into our crystal balls. We have hopped out of our time machines, and we are ready to predict the landing spots for all of the fantasy relevant rookies in this year's NFL draft. Welcome in to the Fantasy Football Fellows podcast. Lucas Wenzel, Tyler Platt hanging out with you. No Cameron Lawrence tonight, but that is okay, Ty, because all of his predictions would be wrong anyways. We don't want to know where he thinks players are going to end up. And frankly, we're doing him a disservice, or we're doing him a service by saving him from himself.
I mean, it's kind of the kiss of death whenever Cam tells gives us his predictions when it comes to the NFL draft and stuff. So just be glad as a listener that you don't have to listen to him give his predictions
after his free agents video predictions. We can have fun with that. We can have fun with that. We're all laughing. It's all educated guesses, right? Fun. That's all we're going on here. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. We'll analyze it all afterwards anyways at what it means for your fantasy football rookie drafts. But for now, we're going to take a stab at predicting where we think all of the fantasy football relevant rookies will end up in this year's NFL draft. Not their dream landing spots, but where we think they'll actually land. It's been long enough of an intro. Let's dive on it because we got 20 freaking players to plow through here, Ty. So let's do it. We are going to start with the quarterback position. We're going to work through the running backs and the wide receivers, and then wrap up with Brock Bowers because we're not talking about any other tight ends. All right. So let's do it. We're going to start at the top, work our way down. Let's start with quarterbacks. The first player is indeed Caleb Williams, quarterback out of USC. Let's not spend much time on this one. This is a foregone conclusion. He's the number one overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft. I have him going to the Chicago Bears.
I have him going to Washington because I like to be
different.
No, I've got Chicago too. Like, I think a lot of people... most people, I should say, knew this all the way back in January, right? Even when Justin Fields is still on the roster, we were like, it's Caleb Williams. And if it's not, it's stupid, right? So Chicago made the right decision sending Fields away and now pretty much locking in Caleb Williams to be their quarterback now.
This has been a pick in the making since this time last offseason. Like, can we just quick recap how the Chicago Bears got here? The date is March 10th, 2023. Your phone rings with an Ian Rappaport update. The Chicago Bears, they've agreed to trade the number one overall pick in the 2023 NFL draft to the Carolina Panthers in exchange for wide receiver DJ Moore, the 9th overall pick, a 2023 second, a 2024 first, and a 2025 second, plus a 2024 fourth in there as well. As it stands now, the Carolina Panthers traded DJ Moore, Caleb Williams, Darnell Wright, Tyreek Stevens, a 2024 fourth, and a 2025 second for Bryce Young. They could have traded this year's first for Bryce Young, and it still would have been a lopsided trade. This will go down as potentially the worst history, or oh my goodness, this will potentially go down as the worst trade in NFL history. You're going to get old head historians of the NFL game saying, oh, the Herschel Walker trade was worse.
Right.
It might not get worse than this because you could have traded this year's first for last year's first, and it still would have been bad because Caleb Williams will be the better NFL quarterback than Bryce Young. My goodness, I cannot get that out. So that's how the Chicago Bears got here. That's how they got Caleb Williams. It just baffles me how they got here.
It's unbelievable. I mean, if Chicago goes on to win multiple Super Bowls now, like that puts the nail in the coffin as the worst trade of all time, because I'm not going to sit here saying that, you know, Bryce Young is a horrible quarterback. I think he gets another fair shot with Dave Canales now, and I think he'll be much better.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be Caleb Williams and Tyreek Stevenson and Darnell Wright and 2 other draft picks on top of it, and like DJ Moore also, right? Like it's just not looking good for Carolina, like at all. There's no way you can look at that trade and like twist it to make it a positive for Carolina. Like, sure, you get your quarterback, but your quarterback isn't where you wanted him to be after year 1.
No, not at all. And granted, you can't make the guarantee that you were going to be the number 1 pick in this year's draft again. So I understand the flaw in saying you could have traded this year's first for last year's first and it would have been worse. Like, I understand that's flawed in and of itself, but that's where we're at now, people. That is where we're at now. So Caleb Williams, the Chicago Bears. Ty, let's move on to our next quarterback. It is Jaden Daniels, quarterback out of LSU. Now, it's been a heated debate whether he goes to the Washington Commanders, whether he goes to the New England Patriots. Was it in Peter Schrager's mock draft that came out today? Did he slide down even? No, he did go number 2 to the Washington Commanders. For whatever reason, I thought he slid for whatever reason, which I thought was silly. I have him going to the Washington Commanders. I am not 100% sold they know which quarterback they're taking yet. And they still have, from this day that this video is released, 8 days to figure it out. I think you have to go to Washington.
Yeah. Did you see the report that Washington is hosting every big name quarterback outside of Caleb Williams on a visit like this week? Like,
which is fascinating.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like that where you host all of them at the same time. So that doesn't tell you that Washington doesn't know either. Like, I also have Jaden Daniels slotted to Washington, and I think it just comes down to the fact of like Cliff Kingsbury's, I don't want to say archetype, but all the quarterbacks that he has, had in the past, whether that's at Arizona or just being in an assistant at USC or even like back at Texas Tech with Patty Mahomes, like they've all been athletic quarterbacks. And that's not to say that any of the other ones aren't athletic. I think Jaden Daniels just has a different level of athleticism that I think that would be more intriguing to a Cliff Kingsbury than really any of the other guys.
I would agree with that. I still think Drake May is a super intriguing option there for them as well. But ultimately, I do think it is Jaden Daniels that goes to the Washington Commanders. So far, we're in step. The first 2 picks of the NFL draft being Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. Let's see where we land with our third quarterback. Is Drake May out of North Carolina. Now it's debated if somebody's going to trade up for him. Is New England going to trade down? Are they going to take a quarterback? Are they going to take a Marvin Harrison Jr.? Do the Vikings, are they the ones who trade up and take Drake May here? I have the New England Patriots staying put at this pick and taking Drake May with a 3rd overall pick. I think at the end of the day, the desire to make sure they get a franchise quarterback, regardless of what development needs to happen, they can go out and still make a trade for a Brandon Ayuk, make a trade for a T. Higgins, if they really, really feel like they need to. I don't feel like Drake May is going to be supported there very well, if I'm being perfectly honest. I hate the landing spot, but I do think it's what the Patriots do because they're looking ahead and the future isn't great next year for NFL draft quarterbacks. And so I think they stay put, take their guy, let him sit behind Jacoby Brissett, who, keep in mind, is like consummate professional. Like he is not a bad guy to learn from. So I do think Drake May ends up going to the New England Patriots.
I hate that we are now 3 for 3 with our predictions, because I also have Drake May landing in New England. And I kind of have that same kind of like torn feeling in how I feel about Drake May going to New England, because I think from the franchise perspective, like, yeah, you get your franchise quarterback and you're set. But I'll just say it like this. We thought that about Carolina last year when they were taking Bryce Young, right? So it's not a guarantee by any stretch of the imagination that Drake May just walks in and everything is, sunshine and flowers for the Patriots moving forward. I hate the landing spot because again, there is just no supporting cast there. Like the offensive line probably is going to be a little bit better. But like that's it. Like you're still banking on Juju Smith-Schuster, which they don't
Not
have
even
any
Juju.
faith
I
in
don't
him.
even know if Juju's on the team anymore. You got Kendrick Bourne,
I'm
KJ Osborne, and Sir Pop Douglas,
I,
aka worse than Rashid Shaheed.
I'm sorry. Like if we can't even name, I mean, like KJ Osborne, former Viking, a really good wide receiver 3.
Right.
I
He
just
is on the
don't like him
Patriots.
for
Juju Smith-Schuster. Sorry, I had to correct
yes
myself
with
there.
him
He's
and his
still on the
bad
Patriots.
knees.
He's a wide receiver 4 at this point, though.
Oof. Again, like I just don't like the landing spot for Drake May as a player, but I feel like New England might cave a little bit, honestly, to just kind of pressure, demand
Yep.
that says you better take a quarterback. And ultimately, that's just the route that they'll go.
That's 100% what's going to happen here. They're going to cave to the pressure, take your guy. We'll figure it out later, which again, you and I think both agree might not be the best strategy. And I also hate to say this too, Ty. I have a really, really bad feeling we're going to be 4 for 4 with our first 4 picks here. Let's move on to our next quarterback. JJ McCarthy, quarterback out of Michigan. There's so much smoke around this guy, man. He could go as high as number 2. The Patriots brought him in to wine and dine him. The Giants reportedly are interested in JJ McCarthy. They pick at 6. Obviously, the Minnesota Vikings have been looking to trade up for a quarterback. The Denver Broncos might even get a little bit desperate and try and trade up. I do have JJ McCarthy going to the Minnesota Vikings. I do think they complete a trade with the Los Angeles Chargers at the 5th overall pick and take JJ McCarthy there. Where do you have him going? Are we 4 for 4?
Yeah, we're 4 for 4. I have McCarthy going to Minnesota, and I have a bit of a fun reason as to why.
Yep.
You mentioned one of the teams that's interested in at least in a quarterback, just in general, is the New York Giants. What team did the New York Giants beat in the playoffs that ultimately forced their hand into paying Daniel Jones $140 million?
See, I love the irony in which you're going towards here, because that would be the Minnesota Football Vikings.
It would be the Minnesota Vikings. And so I think it's just a giant smokescreen. I should just clarify. Conspiracy that I have.
Yes.
But the Giants are just, putting out smoke that they're interested in a quarterback to get Minnesota to pay up and risk like tons of future capital and stuff to get a quarterback that may not even be like really worthy of trading out for in that sense. Just as like, hey, we're going to get the last laugh on this one. Again, major conspiracy. I don't think that's the actual reason, but I just think JJ McCarthy in Minnesota is like, it's a home run, honestly.
Yeah.
A guy that just needs to play point guard, let his receivers, let the running game do their thing, and just, again, play point guard, do what Brock Purdy is doing in San Francisco. He doesn't need to do everything, just make the right reads at the right time. And I don't know, man. I think a lot of people, again, are still stuck in that like sample size argument that it's like, well, JJ McCarthy never really threw the ball. And it's like, guys, like I'm sorry. Is that your argument then for Caleb Williams going first overall because he threw a ton at USC? And if it is, I have a hard time trusting you with really any other like draft eval that you have. But again, JJ McCarthy, I think is just super raw, but I think a place like Minnesota is ideal because he can just go in and learn, but also, he can step in and play right away because it's a situation where it's going to be hard for him to fail, right? Like he's going to have, I don't want to call it grace, but he's going to have a lot of leeway and have a ton of leash in terms of, how much he learns in year one.
And I think if he goes to Minnesota, I actually think they probably let Sam Darnold start and grip it and rip it for a while. I don't think they have to force JJ McCarthy in. Now, the thing is, if you do think JJ McCarthy helps you win more quickly, maybe you should put him in then, because if you have to go with that 2025 first to move up to go get him, you'd really rather not take that pick, right? You actually want to make sure you win. So we'll see what route Minnesota decides to go. But you and I are in step so far that JJ McCarthy will be a Minnesota Viking. This is where I think we're going to first differ. And I almost made, I think we'd almost go 5 for 5. But let's move on to our next quarterback. It is Bo Nix, quarterback, the Oregon Ducks. And I lied. I am changing my pick because I do think the more I've been thinking about it,
liar.
the more I've been thinking about it, the more this just makes sense. And at the end of the day, I do think Bo Nix ends up becoming a Denver Bronco because I do think the Broncos trade. I know. Okay, here. Let me here. I'll say this first. I originally had Bo Nix going to the Las Vegas Raiders at the start of the second round.
Oh.
And then I thought to myself, these teams are drafting back to back in the first round. The Broncos know if they don't take Bo Nix, they don't have a second round pick. This is the problem. They don't have a second round pick. So if they're going to look at a quarterback in this draft, it has to be in the first round. And so you can either force your hand to the Raiders and say, go ahead, take Bo Nix at 13th overall. We dare you. And we'll trade back and accumulate some more capital. Because frankly, this team does need more draft capital.
Mm-hmm. And
so I think it would be wise for them to trade down. And I do think they'll probably end up taking a Bo Nix, somewhere between pick 15 and let's say 20. Somewhere in that range, I think they'll trade between or trade back into. And whatever team is desperate for an edge rusher, is desperate for an offensive lineman, will come up and pay the price to come get that player. So Bo Nix, Denver Broncos. I just like the fit with Sean Payton as well. Just a simple quarterback who can point guard an offense, does more checkdowns, doesn't need to push the ball downfield. He can still make something happen with his feet as well. So Bo Nix, Denver Broncos. Your reaction says you also had Bo Nix to the Denver Broncos.
I just love the fact that when I'm right before I even need to say anything. So you change your answer to what mine is.
So my thought process, my first thought before I put down the Las Vegas Raiders was Bo Nix to the Denver Broncos because one, I like to fit in. Two, I think the Denver Broncos do need to take a quarterback in this draft. Spencer Rattler isn't going to cut it, frankly, because he's always then you take a shot on Spencer Rattler in round 3 or 4. I don't think that can be an option for the Broncos. I just don't think it can be. Because you still have the opportunity to take a quarterback in the first round. I don't have a problem taking Bo Nix in the first round. If JJ McCarthy is going to go 5th overall, I have zero problem with Bo Nix going 18th overall, let's say. I don't know if that's actually who's going to trade up, but you get my point. If JJ McCarthy is going to go top 5, I have zero problem with Bo Nix going in the first round. And I just think it has to be the Denver Broncos if they want a quarterback. I'd play chicken with the Raiders. Go ahead, do it. If at worst you miss out on a quarterback, then you take a swing next year. You tank for next year. I like that. That it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think everything that you said about Denver situation and how Bo Nix can fit into their draft plans and all that kind of stuff, I am in 100% agreement with. There's no debate that I have with that. I think the only thing that people get caught up on is they're going to spend the 12th pick on Bo Nix. That's a waste. And it's
it might not be.
It might not be. The other part of it is you trade back and you get capital, or I guess ideally in a perfect world, you get Denver to trade back where they can get a trade package that includes a second round pick this year. And then they either make a push early in the second round to go trade, because here's the thing. If one of the top, if Michael Penix and Bo Nix are not taken within the first 15 picks, there is a chance greater than at least 50%, in my opinion, that they make it to the second round, because there's no teams after that 15th pick that are going to take a quarterback. Like the only team you can make an argument about are like the Rams, because they don't trust like Stafford's health. I don't think that's a legit, reality at all. And the other one is Pittsburgh, but like you just traded for Justin Fields and you've got 1 year rental of Russell Wilson. So it's like, again, if one of those two guys falls outside of the top 15, there's a chance that they then fall to the second round, which is much more understandable than to a lot of people than I think when they hear Bo Nix and Michael Penix. Early second round, something like that. It doesn't need to be the first round. So Denver can really kind of play with the board a little bit. But back to just where we're predicting Bo Nix to go, it's got to be Denver. Like there really is no other situation or no other team that he would really work well in. Like you brought up Vegas, and it's like, well, what's on?
I don't love the
Gardner Minshew and
right
in Bo Nix, right? Like, what's the difference? Yeah, like there are differences, but it's like at least Michael Penix is a little bit different than Bo Nix in different ways, and arm talent, strength, all that kind of stuff. We're not going to get into it, but it's like Bo Nix and Denver feels like it's the right pairing.
Well, let's move on. Let's wrap out the quarterbacks then with Michael Penix Jr. You mentioned if nobody takes Penix in the top 15, there's a greater than 50% chance he falls to the second round. I think there is a 98% chance Michael Penix falls to the second round. There's too much of an injury history with this guy. The talent is there. I don't mind his arm talent, but I also think a lot of people are overinflating his talent as well. People are talking about how he's a super consistent and accurate quarterback. I actually didn't see that on tape. I have problems with his consistency. I think he can't hit the intermediate short pass as frequently as he needs to. I like that he takes shots downfield. I like that he likes to push the ball downfield. But if he can't combo that with the short intermediate game, and if he isn't hitting the deep ball at a high enough clip, I have my concerns. And again, the injury history. And if nobody takes him in the top 15, there ain't no way anybody between picks 15 and 32 are going to take him, because nobody needs him. So I think Michael Penix Jr. ends up a New York Football Giant in the second round.
Ooh, interesting.
Think if the Giants are serious about exploring a quarterback option, they would be lunatics to draft JJ McCarthy with the 6th overall pick. Absolutely brainless. When you could just wait till the second round and take Michael Penix Jr., unless if you're scared of a Vegas in the early second round taking him. But even then, they have Gardner Minshew. Antonio Pierce has mentioned support of Aiden O'Connell for God knows what reason. But you look at the teams ahead of the Giants. It's the Panthers who have Bryce Young, the Patriots who, in our eyes, will draft a quarterback with the number 3 pick, the Cardinals who have Kyler, the Commanders who just drafted a quarterback, the Chargers with Herbert, the Titans with Levis, Panthers, Commanders, Packers with Jordan Love, Texans with CJ Stroud, Falcons with Kirk Cousins, Raiders again, Saints with Derek Carr, are stuck with him, Colts with Richardson. Michael Penix could tumble a ways in this draft. And I think he could make it to the New York Football Giants at pick 47, and I think they scoop him up there.
I like it. Because I was going through my quarterback list and I was like, I guess the Giants are going to be rolling with Daniel Jones and Drew Lock for this year. Yeah, right. And it's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see if it pays off for him. But I think the other team that isn't getting enough, I shouldn't say getting enough publicity or pub, because I think there's a good reason why it hasn't been discussed a lot or, put out into the interwebs as a possibility. But But I've got this feeling that Michael Penix could end up in Seattle.
I kind of like it. Kind of like it.
And Seattle has the luxury with the 16th pick in the first round. They could take Penix there. They could also wait until the second round. Now, if they were to do that, and you see Denver and Vegas pass up on the quarterbacks too, you're kind of then getting into a bidding war at the beginning of the second round to make sure that you get in front of those teams. But I think when it comes to Penix in Seattle, his former offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, is going to Seattle to be their new offensive coordinator. He is walking into a very, very good situation as well. Offensive line isn't super great at the moment, so that's why I think it would make more sense for Seattle to wait until the second round, use that first pick on an offensive lineman. But like DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, you've got a run game with Kenneth Walker, with Zach Charbonnet. I know they still have Geno Smith. Geno Smith still has 2 years left on his deal, but I think you can let Penix sit for a year if you wanted to. And then after this year into 2025, you could free up about $20 million in cap space if you think it's Penix's turn to take over, and you can move Geno out of the way. And I think if that were to happen, that Penix and Geno Smith quarterback room is very similar to a Dak Prescott, Tony Romo quarterback room, where you've got the young gun ready to go at a moment's notice, but you don't want to do the veteran dirty by just like not giving him a chance at all. Right. So again, I understand why it hasn't been talked about a whole lot, but I think it's kind of strange that no one has really put the two together to be like, oh, his offensive coordinator is in Seattle, and Seattle has a first and second round pick.
Seattle does not have a second round pick. It's to the New York.
They don't.
They do not.
Oh,
it's the New York Giants. So this whole time you're explaining that, I'm like, I mean, they could trade back in the first round, maybe pick up a second round pick, or they would have to trade from the third round into the second round. So they actually don't have a second round pick because it does belong to the New York Giants.
So now I feel like a stooge for going through all of that, and I'm kidding.
I almost cut you off. I'm like, I'm waiting for you to say, oh yeah, they could trade back in the first round and pick up a second. Oh my God. Wait, they don't have a second.
I don't want to get too far into the weeds of like, I just think they could trade back for a team that is looking for a wide receiver, like like one of the top 5 guys that we will talk about later. And then, they trade all the way back, and then there's Michael Penix right there for him. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Right. And that's not to say Michael Penix then couldn't slide into the first round, because I do think the Seahawks could be a trade back candidate. They have other holes that they need to fill, but again, at 16, you're kind of getting into like the second, third tier of guys in the first round, and it's just not as productive of players at that point. And you could probably find a team again in the late first round, if a Brian Thomas Jr. is still on the board, to trade up and give up the capital necessary to make that leap, which could be a second round pick or an additional or a third round pick. And then from pick 22, 23, 24, whoever it is that moves up, they could take a Michael Penix late first round as well. That is not out of the cards, but at this point, I think there is a very, very high probability Michael Penix falls out of the first round, but you and I can differ on that. So let's, we wrapped up quarterbacks, Ty. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back with the running backs, the wide receivers, and Brock Bowers. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back and we are going to fly through running back, wide receiver, and Brock Bowers landing spot in the 2024 NFL Draft. Hi, let's get to predicting these running backs. Trey Benson out of Florida State, the consensus running back one in this class. There's a lot of different spots he could go. I think it's a question of how early will Trey Benson go as well. Again, this running back draft class is not that strong. And I think a lot of people want to try and push these running backs into the early second round. Breece Hall was an early second round pick. Just because Bijan Robinson was a top 10 pick, because Saquon Barkley was a top 10 pick, Najee Harris was a first round pick, doesn't mean we have to force these guys up the draft board. Okay? That being said, I do think Trey Benson gets selected in the second round. And I do think it's the Cincinnati Bengals who take Trey Benson with their second round pick. They brought in Zach Moss, who is a nice little running back. They have Chase Brown.
Chase Brown.
I'm like, I can only come up with Chase, and it's Chase Brown. They have Chase Brown. Nice little player. I think Trey Benson could trump both of them, though. I think he could come in and be the shifty, bendy running back that they need. Zach Moss is just a brute, right? He is straight downhill, hit the hole, hit it hard, run until they physically bring you down. I think Trey Benson could give them a little bit of that bend they need. Add another dynamic element to that offense to replace Joe Mixon. Not the best scenario in the world in terms of, Joe Mixon might just not be an efficient running back anymore, but they bring in Trey Benson, get some fresh juice in there. I don't hate that for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think he is the lone running back taken in the second round, and I do think it's by the Cincinnati Bengals.
Interesting, because the team that I have...
Oh, I lied. He's not the only running back taken in the second round. I apologize. I screwed that up. I do have one more going in the second round. God, helmet. Where's the helmet?
Helmet.
We need a helmet.
No, but my team has a pick in the second round before the Bengals, and I was trying to justify in my head, does that make a whole lot of sense? And I kind of went back, or I decided just to be like, he could probably still be there in the third round when they pick again. I have him going to Vegas.
I don't hate that fit.
I just don't think there's any way you feel great about having Zamir White, who kudos to him. He had a great finish to the season, but that does not mean that he is the guy now. And Alexander Mattison. You could add a Trey Benson, and Trey Benson becomes your starter immediately. So I think it's hard to tell with these running backs if pick 44 in the second round is too early for these running backs. I would probably say, yeah, probably, but finding a spot like Vegas, no matter where he's taken in the second or third round, just somewhere on day 2, is such an ideal landing spot for Trey Benson.
Yeah, I don't hate the Raiders, because I do also think that's a spot where he can just walk in and potentially take over that backfield. And I like Zamir White. He's a nice little player, but I do think they add a running back in this draft. And I do have them adding a running back that we will be talking about, just not Trey Benson. Let's move on to the other running back who I think will be taken in the second round. Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, coming in, torn ACL, season ender. You and I are going to agree on this one. I am very, very sure the Dallas Cowboys will scoop him up in the late second round. This just reeks of the Dallas Cowboys picking up another explosive, dynamic offensive weapon. And I think they could potentially pick up Jonathan Brooks at the end of the second round, because teams are going to be scared of the ACL right away. They say running backs are cheap. We can get them later. We don't need to have Jonathan Brooks sit around and wait. If you're the Dallas Cowboys, you can roll out Jonathan Brooks, Rico Dowdle. They just signed Royce Freeman. Shout out Ty for telling me that they signed Royce Freeman. They could roll out just a three-headed monster, let Jonathan Brooks get his legs back underneath him, and then get him full board for the 2025 season where we really get to see what he can do. So I have Jonathan Brooks for the Dallas Cowboys. Where do you have him?
I also have to the Cowboys, but I have it in the third round because I just think the only reason why he would fall is just because of medical reasons.
Yep.
Before the injury, he was certainly looking like a second round pick. So I would really get it if any of those teams in the later half of the second round take Jonathan Brooks. But I also would not be surprised if he's falling somewhere middle of the third round, mid to late third round, just because of his injury. But Dallas is the spot. And I think that is like, I'm not a betting man. And I kind of want to see what the odds are of him going to Dallas because I have to think that it is a heavy, heavy favorite. But
it's got to be a heavy favorite. Yeah, because I mean, and let me also be clear. I also do think Jonathan Brooks could fall all the way to the third just with the medical. I don't think it's a guarantee he's even the second running back off the board. He might be the third or fourth running back off the board.
mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a real possibility the Cowboys could still scoop him up in the third. And maybe they just even trade up in the third to make sure they get him. It could just be as simple as that. Do you have the odds on where he's at, where he's projected to go?
No, there's just odds of him being the first one taken.
Yep.
But I don't see a specific team or pick. Weird. That's honestly just because they probably, DraftKings and FanDuel have not seen anything about Jonathan Brooks and where he could go on Reddit. That's probably why they're zero odds.
Let's go ahead. We'll wrap up Jonathan Brooks on that since we both agree he'll be going to the Dallas Cowboys. And let's talk about our third running back. Marshawn Lloyd out of USC. Very, very interesting prospect. He definitely lacks the vision. I like Marshawn Lloyd's game. I just don't love it. And again, we're talking about a down year for this class. So when I speak of the things I like about Marshawn Lloyd, it is in perspective of this class being a down class. That being said, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this one. Carolina Panthers take Marshawn Lloyd.
I had the Panthers down and then I changed it right before we started.
Just like Bo Nix to the Denver Broncos, who I had down before we started.
Exactly.
So here's the thing with Marshawn Lloyd to the Panthers. The Panthers have 2 early third round picks in this year's draft. I think it's a total possibility they take him with one of those. They have the first overall pick in the third, and I believe I literally had the picks right in front of me, and now I don't anymore. I am pulling them up. They have the first pick, and they have, where did it go? Do they not? I misspoke.
They had 2 early seconds.
Oh, that's what it was. You're 100% right. So they only have 1 pick in the third round, and I do think that pick could be Marshawn Lloyd. You're right. I got that confused with the second round. Because I have another player on my list. Yes, I think Marshawn Lloyd could go to them in the early third round. They could trade back out of that pick. They could just take him there. But I think that's about the range where Marshawn Lloyd will probably go in this draft.
I think he's a third round guy. And again, I had the Panthers before I changed it to this team, and a team that did kind of go out and spend a little bit of money on a running back. But I don't think the guy that they signed takes them out of the running back sweepstakes in the draft. It's the New York Giants.
Yep, I had them in consideration here as well.
It really comes down to just you have no one outside of Devin Singletary. And like Devin Singletary proved to be, a decent little back for Houston last year. I don't think that Devin Singletary is then your guy for this year if you're the Giants. So going and getting a guy like Lloyd, who he is quick, he shows some bursts, vision is a little off. I think it's a more ideal scenario for him where he can, he doesn't need to play every down. He can be used as a weapon out of the backfield if they so choose. So I've got the Giants there, and I think it's just more so like, when the Giants pick in the third round, just getting the best one, and Marshawn Lloyd might be the best one at that point.
Yeah, I had the New York Giants in consideration here as well. And I just think the Carolina Panthers might just beat them to the punch. Miles Sanders obviously ain't cutting it. Chuba Hubbard ain't cutting it. Go out, get some fresh legs. I actually think he could be a decent little piece alongside Bryce Young and the other pieces they could add to this offense in the draft as well. Let's move on to our next running back, Ty, because, we got to get to these wide receivers because those are going to be a lot of fun. But we won't skip over Jalen Wright out of Tennessee. We talked about the Raiders earlier. I have Jalen Wright being drafted by the Las Vegas Raiders. I think he could be a little compliment to Zamir White. I think Alexander Madison is merely just a depth signing, and I think Jalen Wright, with 4.38 speed at the NFL Combine 40-yard dash, you could add him next to Zamir White. Zamir White, do you know he ran a 4.4 at the NFL Combine? Surprisingly quick.
Surprisingly quick.
So that's not to take anything away from Zamir White, but I think Jalen Wright's explosiveness outside of Zamir White's physicality could be a nice compliment. Holy cow, what?
I'm just looking at his mock draftable percentiles and stuff. Zamir White, 92nd percentile 40-yard dash, 4.4. 92nd percentile 10-yard split.
Sneaky athletic.
Oh man. Hello.
Sneaky quick. Yeah. But again, I think their play style is different enough where I think Jalen Wright could add an explosive element to their offense, a big playability to their offense, a nice change of pace guy, if you will, to bring in on the later downs, or give him some of the second down work too. So I have Jalen Wright going to the Raiders. Where do you have him landing?
I have him landing with the Arizona Cardinals.
I also really like this spot too.
This landing spot is just kind of a 1-2 punch then with James Conner. But I think it really sets up Arizona for the long haul then when it comes to the running back position, because Jalen Wright is a weapon out of the backfield in the receiving game. But if you need him to pass protect, which I have to think that they're going to ask a lot of them of their running backs, because you do have a Kyler Murray. And if you do use your 4th overall pick wisely on a wide receiver in this draft, the focal point will be the passing game of your offense and not exactly Jalen Wright and the rushing aspect of it. Jalen Wright can pass block then too for Kyler Murray. So I think just the profile of Jalen Wright fits exactly with what Arizona could be looking for in their next running back after James Conner.
I couldn't agree more, because they are another team that I think they'd be my second landing spot for Jalen Wright. You just need somebody after James Conner. They brought in DJ Dallas from Seattle. They have Michael Carter. Special teams, special plays, special players. Had to slide that in there. But yeah, I actually like that as a compliment to James Conner. And eventually the wheels are going to fall off for James Conner. And Jalen Wright, that would be a bad situation for him to be in alongside Marvin Harrison Jr. potentially, or whatever wide receiver they may take, or maybe not take. We'll see. But yeah, I like that spot for Jalen Wright. Let's move on to our last running back tie before we get to the wide receivers. I hate the fact that I'm going to say this about Blake Corum. I hate that I'm going to give in to the stupid Michigan connection and say that the Los Angeles Chargers are going to draft. I don't think the Chargers use an early second round pick on a Trey Benson. I don't think they do it on a Jonathan Brooks. Maybe on a Marshawn Lloyd, but let's just be honest. It's going to be easiest for Jim Harbaugh to say, Blake Corum, come join me in LA, baby. I freaking hate that I'm doing it, but I am. Because honestly, I don't want to think about Blake Corum anywhere else other than with Jim Harbaugh on the Los Angeles Football Chargers. All right, that's my piece. Where do you think he lands?
Oh, it's gonna be the best bit come draft time when the broadcasts are trying to find some things
Oh,
to talk about, and
it's
they're
gonna be
like,
it's gonna be horrible. It's gonna be
"What Michigan
terrible.
players? What Michigan players are still available for the Chargers to take with their
Like,
picks?"
this okay. This needs to be a drinking game. How many times do you think they bring up Jim Harbaugh and the players that he could be drafting with their picks? Roman Wilson, right? He'll be
Yep.
on the board still for the Chargers. Still have a need at wide receiver. Roman Wilson still on the board.
Cornelius
Like,
Johnson in the late
Oh
rounds.
my god!
Junior Colson, the linebacker. Let's see, Mike Sanders still because you need a nickel. Zach Zinter because you need interior offensive lineman.
Just a guy naming dudes right here.
No, I've got Corn going to the Chargers too because
no!
That's the script. The script got leaked, dude, and it got leaked as soon as Harbaugh got hired by the Chargers. You need do we need to invest in a new chair for you? The amount of times that you've been falling out of your chair is
it's not one, it's not on wheels and it rocks kind of nicely. So if I get enough force, it's going.
We're gone.
We're gone.
We are gone.
So all right, there we go. We plowed through the running backs. Let's spend some time talking about the wide receivers now, Ty. Yes, we're starting with Malik Nabers because I hit the wrong
you psyched me out.
I hit the wrong transition. Let's start with Malik Nabers. We'll get to Marvin Harrison Jr. Oh, we are running a high quality show here, people. Malik Nabers out of LSU. I think people are overthinking the Giants' first round draft pick because there's so much smoke around these quarterbacks. I don't think they end up taking one. They desperately just need to get somebody on the perimeter. You cannot roll out Sterling Shepard, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt as your starting wide. You just cannot when Malik Nabers is there. When Brian Daboll can manufacture him all the touches he can dream of out of the slot and still make Daniel Jones work. I have Malik Nabers going to the New York Giants at the 6th pick.
No, I do too. It is honestly just like, don't overthink it. Do what is smartest for your team. Look, you are in. The funny thing is, no, I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole. That's a conversation for another episode. Just get the stud wide receiver talent because
yes,
let's be honest, it's quarterback or wide receiver at 6. So we're looking at JJ McCarthy, Penix, Bo Nix, or Malik Nabers or Rome Odunze.
No-brainer.
That's a no-brainer to me too.
We'll keep our piece there. Let's move back. We'll move back to Marvin Harrison Jr. now. Again, I think you and I are going to be in consensus here. We had the first 3 picks going Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake May. I guess maybe we won't be in agreement here. I guess depending on where we had the Vikings potentially trading up to. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. going to the Arizona Cardinals. I think if he isn't on the board for the Los Angeles Chargers, I think that is what then inclines them to move back. If Marvin Harrison Jr. is there on the board for the Chargers, I do think it's a legitimate possibility that they do go wide receiver there if Minnesota makes a trade with Arizona instead. So I'm not keeping that option off the table. At the end of the day, though, let's not get cute, Arizona. You just let Marquise Brown walk in free agency. Michael Wilson is your wide receiver 1 right now. You got Greg Dortch. Michael Wilson is fine. I like the upside he flashed last year, but come on. Let's just get real. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. here. Get Kyler your guy.
I understand the want to trade back, especially with who could be trading up to go get one of the quarterbacks. But trading back so far that they would trade back, and taking you out of the running for Marvin Harrison Jr. and Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So just stick at 4, take Marvin Harrison, keep it simple, stupid.
We won't say any more on that, man. I mean, we're flying through these wide receivers here. You and I are not going to have the same pick on Rome Odunze. I promise you that right now. Rome Odunze is a fascinating one because after the New York Giants, you are looking at pick 7, the Tennessee Titans, who have made aggressive moves on Calvin Ridley this offseason. You have DeAndre Hopkins there as well. I don't think it's productive for them to add a third wide receiver to that room. You have the Atlanta Falcons, who, sure, it'd be fun to have Rome Odunze there, but let's be honest, you got Drake London, you got Kyle Pitts, you got Bijan Robinson. You cannot spend this pick on an offensive player. You got Chicago Bears. Look, I get it. It'd be fun to have Rome Odunze paired up with Caleb Williams. But you traded for Keenan Allen. Okay, you traded for a savvy vet. I don't think you trade for a savvy vet and then take a young wide receiver with the 9th pick in the draft. I get it's fun. You want to have a replacement ready to go. There are better ways to spend that 9th pick, though. I think that Keenan Allen trade was purely to say we're going to get Caleb Williams comfortable and acclimated so we can go ahead and use that 9th pick, not on the offense. You get to the New York Jets then. That's where it starts getting interesting. Could go to the Jets. But again, you look at the Vikings, the Broncos. The Broncos could use him. The Raiders could. There's a team, though, that has been blowing quite a bit of smoke over the last few weeks. Well, not the last few weeks. Really over the last week. I think the Indianapolis Colts get aggressive. Trade up to the 8th or 9th pick and take Rome Odunze. Not as far of a jump. They have the capital to make it happen. And you get Anthony Richardson, a high quality outside wide receiver to pair with exclusively slot wide receiver Michael Pittman. Get Jonathan Taylor as well. You get Shane Steichen, Rome Odunze. Are you freaking kidding me? I'd love to see the Colts get aggressive and trade up. And if reports are true that the Indianapolis Colts want to get aggressive and trade up, it's either that or Brock Bowers. And frankly, if I have the chance to take Rome Odunze, I would go ahead and do that if I'm Shane Steichen.
Fascinating. I did not think you were going to go that route.
I seriously think that's where he could end up. I just don't. You got to leap the Jets. The Jets are the team to leap there. Because anybody between 7 and 9 before the Jets, that's a team you got to trade with.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the Jets, though, because that's where I have him going. Jets trading up to 7 with Tennessee. Again, not too far of a jump. You then give Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, and Rome Odunze with Breece Hall with an improved offensive line. I don't even think I need to explain it more than that. Like, it makes a ton of sense for New York. And then especially, you think long-term then, Rodgers retires, whatever it is, whoever your next quarterback is, gets 2 stud weapons to throw to in Garrett Wilson and Rome Odunze. There's enough targets to go around for the both of them. They're not going to be eating into each other's workload. I desperately want Rome Odunze to end on the Jets.
I love the pairing with Garrett Wilson. You get 2 pillars on the outside for Rodgers. You push the chips to go out and win now, and whoever they bring in after Rodgers has 2 pillars to still throw to in future years as well. I do like that for Rome Odunze. So let's keep it moving though, Ty. Oh no, I don't have a transition for Brian Thomas Jr. ready to go. So let's go ahead and just pivot to him right now. We took it off the screen. That was my fault. I clicked it and then you clicked it and it didn't work.
Low budget productions.
Low budget production. Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU, teammate of Malik Neighbors. I'm debating if I want to switch my pick right now. So I'm going to start with you. Where do you have Brian Thomas Jr. going? Because I got excited about him before the episode, and then I keep looking over, keep running through the scenarios in my head, and the more I keep thinking about it, the more I'm not sure if it's actually going to happen. So where do you have Brian Thomas Jr. landing?
I have him landing with the Chiefs.
The Chiefs.
The Chiefs. This one I had to go kind of back and forth on because I think there's really 3 teams I could have chosen for Brian Thomas, and I would have loved each and every spot. But I think Brian Thomas, he definitely could go a lot higher, go way before pick 20. I think that's certainly a possibility. But if he's there at 20, man, Kansas City is going to send a heck of an offer over to Pittsburgh to be like, hey, we want Brian Thomas. And I think Pittsburgh, it'll depend on how the board has fallen for Pittsburgh. But in a scenario like this, let's say the board doesn't fall in favor of Pittsburgh, trade back to 32, you get quite a bit of capital on top of it too. The Chiefs come up to 20 and they walk away with Brian Thomas Jr., just a guy with blazing speed. It gives them a much more reliable downfield threat, right? To take the defense really from collapsing down on Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice. Brian Thomas can really go over the top of the defense and stuff like that. I think that's ultimately what sold me about Brian Thomas on the Chiefs.
I'm going to say Brian Thomas goes to the Los Angeles Chargers. I think they, again, trade back with Minnesota. They pick up pick 23 in the process. And I think that's where they end up taking Brian Thomas Jr. They could trade up with the additional capital they got. But they do recognize wide receiver is in need. I just don't think they address it early. They trade back with Minnesota. Because, again, I have the Colts trading up ahead of them, even to then snag Rome Odunze. So they end up going, offensive tackle at 11 would be my prediction. Can I just throw out where I originally was going to get cute and had Brian Thomas Jr. going?
Sure.
The Dallas Cowboys.
See, I don't mind that one either.
See, I love it. I love it. I would love if he ends up there. The problem is the Cowboys would have to give some capital to trade up. And so then when you also have Jonathan Brooks going there, whether that's first, second round, do they wait until the second round to take a guy? They would have to trade up from 24 to get him. And I don't know what capital that would take. And I don't know if the Chargers would also allow to be, I don't know if they would allow a team to leap them. Because I think if they get 23, I think they trade up to go get a Brian Thomas Jr. to make sure they get a wide receiver in the first round. I think because if they do that, they have to take preventative measures to make sure they don't get sniped on a wide receiver. Otherwise, they're looking at like a Troy Franklin, Xavier Worthy, early second round guys. And I just don't think they can put themselves in that position with Quentin Johnson and Joshua Palmer as your starting wide receivers. That's what it's coming down to for me. Because at the end of the day, I could see the Cowboys moving up from like 24 to was it 18 I was looking at with not the Bengals. Potentially the Steelers at 20 if Brian Thomas slides that far, or if they get crafty and trade up with the Seattle like we talked about, right? If they want to trade back and take a shot on Michael Penix in the late first. But again, that costs capital, and the Cowboys aren't exactly swimming in draft capital right now. So I'm going to go ahead and just stick with the Chargers since they will be taking ahead of the Cowboys by my projection. All right, let's move on to our next wide receiver, Ty, and I do have a transition for this one. My favorite wide receiver in this class, A.D. Mitchell, wide receiver out of Texas. This is an easy one for me. He will be a Buffalo Bill. As much as I would love to see the Buffalo Bills trade up all the way to the top of the first round to get Rome Odunze, I don't think they end up doing that. I think it's probably what they should do, given they just got rid of Diggs, given they can afford to give up some of the capital. They have a few compensatory picks. They got traded an additional second round pick in 2025. I would love to see it, but at the end of the day, I don't think they end up pulling the trigger. Daniel Jeremiah said he wouldn't expect the Buffalo Bills to make that kind of an offer and trade up. I'm going to take his word on that and say that A.D. Mitchell is a Buffalo Bill And I frankly like that because I do think the Bills could craft him into a wide receiver 1 there.
Yeah, I've got the same spot with Buffalo. I think he adds an element to their offense that they need currently, but have been needing for a while. Like Steph Diggs was carrying a lot of the receiving workload, but he wasn't exactly like the do-it-all guy for them.
Yep.
AD Mitchell can be the do-it-all guy for Buffalo moving forward. And you're on a significantly cheaper contract and stuff like that. I think it makes too much sense really for Buffalo to look elsewhere if there isn't AD Mitchell still on the board in the first round.
We'll keep it short and sweet there. If we're both in agreement on AD Mitchell and the talent that he could possess and potentially bring to that offense, we're just going to move it on and talk about. I still don't have a drop for this player, but another fun player to talk about. Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey, wide receiver out of Georgia. You had Brian Thomas Jr. going to the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they stay home at 32. Take Ladd McConkey there with that pick. I think with everything around Rashee Rice right now, we're not going to dive into that. I think you can add a very crafty route runner, very crisp, clean, artistic route runner on the perimeter. Hear me. On the perimeter, we are not talking Cooper Kupp. We are not talking Hunter Renfrow. We're not talking Julian Edelman, Wes Welker. This is not a slot guy. He plays on the perimeter. Go ahead, slot Ladd McConkey out there. And if Rashee Rice is able to come back and play, you slot him in the slot. You obviously have Travis Kelce as well. Give Patrick Mahomes a quality outside wide receiver to play alongside Marquise Brown. I think they retool this offense very nicely by adding Ladd McConkey then in the late first round.
I have Ladd McConkey to the Chargers in the second round. Guy that just gets open with ease for Justin Herbert. He doesn't need to then wait for Joshua Palmer or Quentin Johnson to get open downfield. He's got Ladd McConkey in the slot right away. Not saying that Ladd McConkey is Roman Wilson, but big part of the reason why like the Michigan passing attack was so good was because they had a really good slot wide receiver in Roman Wilson. You get an upgrade to Roman Wilson, in my opinion, in Ladd McConkey. I think this makes sense for the Chargers. I don't know. Again, I don't know if I would pass up on one of the top 3 wide receivers at number 5 and then wait for Ladd in the second. But that might just be the identity thing that Harbaugh is going for, that, you know, build up the trenches and then we'll take good players elsewhere later on in the draft.
Yeah, I think if the Chargers do end up passing, that's an easy early second round pick for them to make if Ladd McConkey slides down to them. Let's move on. We got 2 more wide receivers and Brock Bowers to talk about, Ty. Let's move on here to I hate my landing spot for this player, man. It is Troy Franklin out of Oregon. You know how we made the DJ Chark joke last episode? Troy Franklin, you are a Carolina Panther.
Freaking A, man.
You are a Carolina Panther. I hate it. Troy Franklin doesn't deserve this. But when the Carolina Panthers have 2 early second round picks, get a field stretcher in Troy Franklin. Play alongside Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen. Going to replace a Terrace Marshall. As much as you and I, maybe more so you, thought the early second round pick for them last year out of
Jonathan
Ole Miss.
Mingo.
Jonathan Mingo, thank you. Like, why can't I not come up with that name? The Jonathan Mingo experiment didn't work out too well. Take a stab at a Troy Franklin. I'm sorry. I didn't want to do it. I originally didn't have Troy Franklin here. I didn't. But when I changed Brian Thomas Jr. from the Cowboys to the Chargers, I had Troy Franklin on the Chargers. I did. But as soon as I made that change, I had to make a pivot there. So Troy Franklin, you are unfortunately a Carolina Panther.
I don't even really want to talk about this anymore because I also have Troy Franklin on the Panthers.
No! Oh! No! No! Oh, Troy.
Troy, you deserve so much better than this. Oh man, I will say though, like at least in Carolina, he can be the field stretcher that they need.
Yeah.
Versus some other teams that might try to pigeonhole him into a different role. Oh man, but it's just no. Like Troy deserves better than Carolina, but that's just how the draft is going to go. That there are, I mean, how many draft picks does Carolina have? Like 8, 9. Where is it? 3, 4, 6, 7. That's it. So, unfortunately, 7 players are going to have to go to Carolina and try to make something happen there. But unfortunately, I think Troy's one of them, and that sucks. That sucks a lot.
We could move off of the depressing reality that Troy Franklin is in for by moving on to our final wide receiver. Xavier Worthy, the fastest man in NFL Combine history, 4.2 140 out of Texas, teammate of A.D. Mitchell. I originally had Xavier Worthy then going to the Carolina Panthers, but since I had to change up my Brian Thomas Jr. pick, Xavier Worthy I have going to the Las Vegas Raiders to be their field stretcher, to play alongside Devontae Adams, who, yeah, crafty vet. Jacoby Myers, nice little piece, but let's be honest, not the fastest guy in the world, pretty much slot exclusive there for him. So why not add some speed on the outside? I don't want to bring up Henry Ruggs because that is the dumbest comparison I could ever make in the entire world. But all I'm saying is that if you need some speed, go ahead and take an Xavier Worthy here. If you're going to go draft a guy, if you want speed on the perimeter, I'm going to end it there because we're not going to get into the Henry Ruggs deal. I refuse to. But let's be honest, they need some speed on the perimeter. So let's go ahead and get him Xavier Worthy.
I have him landing in Miami.
You know what? I like it. Where though? Pick 20?
I think Miami trades up in the second from 55 somewhere to I don't know who would actually trade back, but you can find somebody to trade back. I'm just gonna manifest it here.
Manifest it.
Miami's gonna trade up in the second and take Xavier Worthy. And it's really not because of his speed. Said no one ever. Like that's the only reason why I've got Xavier Worthy go to Miami. It's because he's fast. Xavier Worthy go fast. Miami Dolphin go fast.
Bro.
Everyone on Miami go fast. That's the only reason why.
It's not a bad logic. That's how they're really building out that team. You got Devon Achane there. Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill.
Just saying.
It is very, very true. Let's wrap it out, though, Ty. We got Brock Bowers to talk about. We got our boy to cover here yet. Let's do it. Brock Bowers, the only tight end prospect we are going to talk about out of Georgia. I think we are going to have, I think I already know who you're going to choose. And I'm going to choose the spot that you chose for Rome Odunze. Because Indianapolis Colts sleep the New York Jets to pick 8 or 9. Whichever one they're able to make a deal for. I think the New York Jets go ahead and settle nicely into taking Brock Bowers with the 10th overall pick. Again, you get Aaron Rodgers, that other weapon. They have a need at the tight end position. Let's go ahead and get Aaron Rodgers a talented weapon underneath while Garrett Wilson works on the outside. So I have Brock Bowers to the New York Jets. And I'm not going to guess yours, but I think I know where you have him going.
Really? I mean, there is kind of one team.
Oh, then maybe not.
I guess 2 teams. Because I think, are you thinking of Indy?
I was thinking you would have him going to Indy.
I have him going a little later than that.
Really?
Cincinnati.
I love it. Do they trade up? Does he make it to 18?
See, it's the great debate about the value of tight ends in the draft slot that you pick them at, right? Like, are you getting the best bang for your buck, closer to, top 8, I'll say. Like, I think the Jets is really the earliest that he probably should go, and it makes a ton of sense. I think 15 makes a ton of sense too. I think if the board falls a certain way, you could see Indy trade back with
Sure.
I mean, let's go in the hypothetical of like Dallas gets real aggressive and goes up to 15 to take Brian Thomas.
Hoo-wee!
Brock Bowers, that next fit is really with Cincinnati at 18. So I think the best way to say it is Brock Bowers to the Bengals at 18 is much more of a realistic option, or much more reality than it is just a wishful thinking or a wishful idea.
It's definitely more plausible than people might want to give it credit for.
Exactly. But I do think like it's really 10 to 15 is like the sweet spot for Brock Bowers. But again, if things play out a certain way, right? You have the Jets trade up for Rome Odunze, then you got Indy trading all the way back into the 20s behind Cincinnati. Just like that, Brock Bowers is an instant fit then for Cincinnati.
Yeah, I would love Brock Bowers to end up in Cincinnati. My fear is that he just doesn't make it there. But again, once you look after, pick 10, maybe a team like the Broncos decides to dip their toes into that pool. It also wouldn't surprise me if Cincinnati makes a move up if somebody in the top 12, 13, 14, because you get the Saints at 14 then. If they make a move up to take a Brock Bowers, that wouldn't surprise me at all. It's not that far of a jump for him. It's not out of the world of possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's wrap it up there, Ty. We covered a whopping 20 prospects. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
Hey, we're going to be live.
Hey, yeah. Oh, how could I forget?
We're gonna be live.
Goodness. Actually,
first round.
Now that I think about it, I was going to bring it up in the post announcements before we sign off.
No, we're gonna be live right here.
You got me. You got me.
We're gonna be live on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook.
Come on.
Going, for first night of the draft. TikTok. How can I forget? We are both forgetting things. No, come hang out with us. We're going to react, dissect all that stuff during the draft, live updates. You'll see live reactions and stuff too.
Little head-to-head competition. We always compete.
Who
has the best mock draft, most accurate one.
Again, just come hang out with us. Come chat it up with us. Talk everything football, all things draft, all things fantasy related, whatever it is. Come hang out with us. We'll be live shortly before the draft starts. So, hopefully we see you guys there.
Yes, come hang out with us on draft night. We are going to have so much fun hanging out with you all. We'll be answering questions, as Ty said, reacting live to picks, everything of the sorts we are going to have. So it's one of our favorite shows of the year because all we do is sit around. We get to talk about the picks, but then also just kind of BS back and forth with one another as well. So make sure to tune into that. That live will be scheduled on our YouTube here. If not, by the time you see this video, very, very soon. So make sure you're following us on the socials as well. FFL is on Twitter. The FFL is on Instagram. Fantasy Football Fellas, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. And turn that notification bell on so you know when all of our newest posts come out. Same for the podcast as well. If you're not subscribed, thanks for all of you loyal listeners over there. Make sure you're subscribed and turn on that notification alert as well so you know when all of our newest podcast episodes are out. I am at Lucas Wentzel on Twitter, at Tyler Plath for Tyler. No podcast episode next week because why, Ty? We are going live for the entire freaking first round, baby. Let's do it. Thanks for tuning in today's episode. We will see you all on draft night. It cannot come soon enough. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy. And we'll see you all on draft night. Come hang out with us. See you all then. Deuces.